Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, and the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Also, check out Off the Floor. That's our Discord server, $2.99 per month. Stage shows, Q&As, chatting with Heat fans all day long, special updates. We give you information there before you get it anywhere else. Again, the link is right here in the description. You're going to need it during basketball season. Trust us. Again, so check it out. It's Off the Floor, link right here in the description. Also, check out the great sponsors of the Five Reasons Sports Network. You can still use this code in the state of Florida and still get your bonus. It's the code 5, F-I-V-E, at prizepicks.com. Go to the Google Play Store, the Apple App Store, or again, the website, prizepicks.com. Use the code 5. Start playing today. You put down $5, you play it. They're going to give you 50 more to play going forward. No strings attached, no questions, none of that stuff. prizepicks.com. And now, today's episode.
Down the Biscayne. Yikes. 5 on the floor. Ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing. You can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing rubber frauds. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing. Got it all band. Y'all seen the block. Stop with one hand. And Pat we trust. It's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the Five Reasons Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick on Five Reasons Sports. I got Alex Toledo. You can follow him at Tropical Blanket. We got Brady Hawk. You can follow at Brady Hawk 305. Check out the last episode that I did with Greg Sylvander. We went through the Yahoo list. They put up a list of the top options. In other words, the best number 1 options, number 2 options, and number 3 options in the league. They had Jimmy Butler as the 15th first option. Bam Adebayo as the 4th second option. Tyler Herro as the 22nd third option. So we went through that, how fair those rankings were. And, I think the Tyler one was a little bit unfair. But again, he's got to prove it this season by staying healthy, fitting in, and playing at a high level. Today, we're going to get into training camp itself. We are just a few days away as we record this. The Heat will have media day on Monday. The 3 of us will be there. We'll be recording interviews with the players, providing content. And then I will be in the Bahamas after that for 3 days, sort of getting the rest of the players and covering their first training camp practices. So as we go into training camp, what are the battles? And this is how I'm going to define this as we start. First thing, each of us is going to come up with one before the break, and then we'll each come up with one after the break. But it could be a battle for playing time. It could be a battle for shots. It could be a battle for Spoelstra's attention. It could be a battle for clutch opportunities. What will we learn out of training camp? Now, some of that stuff we won't learn right away because the games have to be played. But it could also be a battle at the back end of the roster for, say, a full-time guaranteed slot, or to keep a 2-way, something along those lines. So I'm going to start. We'll go around the circle here a little bit. To me, the most interesting battle in the front court of this camp is going to be, and it's not direct because both these guys are going to play and contribute at some point this year, but it's the battle between Kevin Love and Kel'el Ware. And in my view, it's a battle for pushing Erik Spoelstra into the future early this season, because everybody knows what Kevin can do at this stage. And I don't expect a big drop-off from Kevin. He's kept himself in great shape since he's come to South Florida. He was much lighter last year than he's ever been before. Again, I anticipate the same. He takes it seriously. He will be ready to go in all ways. But ideally, the less he plays this year means the more that Ware plays. And that's because Ware has done things to force Erik Spoelstra to put him on the court. Brady, how do you think this battle goes in camp?
It's tough to think because Kel'el, what he did in the summer league, I think they're going to box him in camp a little bit, where Spo's going to do a thing where he's going to want him to play the role that he'll be playing with this team, which would be like a strict dunker spot, come screen, dive, play the role, play the lob threat, see if their guards can kind of find any chemistry with them, just to find pairings. I think is kind of the key, probably even more than him just like breaking out and playing super well offensively. It's more so him like, okay, he fits well with this group. Maybe we could work him in with the second unit here. But I think most of all, what will set him apart is not if he's shooting a bunch of threes in camp, not if he's dominating offensively. It's like, okay, he looks serviceable defensively. And if he does that, I think he wins probably the spot earlier in the season than we expect. Now, if it looks a little shaky, if there's some things in drop that he makes some mistakes, if he's not as quick on his feet as as much as he looked good in summer league at certain parts, it's summer league. Like, it's still lesser talent. So you put guys like Jimmy or Tyler, these other guys in the pick and roll against him. Let's see how he looks, across like these kind of scrimmages. So I think defensively is kind of the biggest key. Probably, I think they're going to match him up with Bam probably a good portion of camp just to try to test him as much as they can. Like, I think Bam has talked about that in the past. Like, he used to be the guy that got tested, and now he's kind of the guy that's being put in this position where he has to test all these young guys. He's the guy that has to push all of them, and it's a different role for him. And part of that comes with being captain. But I know I really do. I really think defensively is where it's going to come down to kind of winning out that battle. But look, as you said, I don't expect the drama from Kevin either. Like, I think the key there is like they know what they're going to get from Kevin. So there's not like a much of a push that they're okay, we need to play him. Ideally, I think the best spot they could be in is that Kel'el just wins the spot straight up and Kevin can play in spot starts. Now, this also isn't a Kevin or Kel'el thing. There's situations where they both could play. Like, I think they could play off each other if they want to go big off the bench. They could play those two guys together against certain teams. So, yeah, I'm interested. I'm interested just because it's more so, to your point, it's them playing for a spot more than them like actually matching up. Because I actually think, like I said, I think Bam's gonna be matching up with him in camp, and they probably pair Kevin with him just to kind of be like that voice. I think they want a veteran next to him just to kind of like keep in his ear a little bit. But I do. It probably is Kevin early in the season, but I think Kel'el plays earlier than we think.
All right. This is how we're going to do this now. Now it's Brady's turn to suggest one, and Alex's turn to comment on it, and then we'll swing back with Alex, and then I comment it. So Brady, you're up.
All right, I'm going to go with one that we haven't talked about as much. I think it's Burks and Jay Rich. I think that's just like an interesting one, just because they're in a similar spot. Like, they're not point guards, even though this team needs a backup point guard. Both of them have their own skill set. Like, Jay Rich is kind of the guy that they're going to lean on, ideally defensively, because they're going to need some defensive help on the point of attack. You want him to be that. And if he is that, if he shows in camp he's kind of hounding defensively like he was at certain points, he probably gets the job. Now, if they look here on this roster and they're saying we probably need a little bit more shooting in some of these lineups, like let's say, I don't know, Jaime or Jovic isn't at the level of shooting as maybe we're projecting them to be at, or making the full jump, and they're like, okay, we need a little bit more shooting. Maybe Burks plays into a spot. Maybe he is playing into kind of somewhat of a rotation. So I really do think that is an interesting matchup in camp. Like, who's playing at a higher level? I just personally think, I really do think he plays into Josh a little more than we expect. I think he used him maybe, Alex, I know you might have had the thought, I think you pushed that maybe Burks plays a little bit more, and I could see that. But part of me thinks he's going to lean on Josh just because of the familiarity thing and just the trust level with him. And I think there's almost the projection level that they need his ideal level defense. They just do. Like, I keep pushing this thing that, like, okay, they got Nasir Little. Defensively, I felt like they just needed more depth with the wings. The reason I'm pushing the wing depth defensively is because all of this time their wings have been their point of attack defenders. Like, that's what it's been over the last few years. So now if you lose Caleb and you're having some, you're wanting some of your own guys like Jaime to step up, or maybe Jimmy to be, at that level defensively, if he has to guard some guards. Ideally, it's a guy like Josh that can step in and just play that role. And you lose DeLon. And DeLon was a big part of their zone, big part of their press, a big part of their point of attack at certain points. So I'm just interested to see that matchup. They feel like two guys that will be on opposite sides of teams in scrimmages. They'll be on opposite sides of teams, and that pink and white game that we'll probably end up going to, in a week and a half. So I am interested in that matchup. And it's not like, usually we'll say, like with guys like this that are on fringe of rotation, it's usually we'll say, who's going to shoot better? But it's not really that, because I think we all know Burks probably will shoot better. It's just who's going to be the better all-around player and who fits into, that second unit.
Alex, how do you think that one plays out?
Well, that one I think is going to be really interesting to watch, and that was going to be the one that I was going to suggest as well. And because I do think it's kind of three guys there. And even though I think the third is a little bit further down the list, but I think Larson inevitably comes into play here. I don't think he's going to be the one to win it out, but I do think he's a part of this where it's like those are going to be the guys that he's going to be directly competing against for minutes in the back end of the rotation, bench guard. And I think it's going to be the case no matter how the starting lineup plays out. I think they're going to want another guard there, and I could totally see it being Jay Rich over Burks as well. I was making that prediction a couple of weeks ago because I think I'm more skeptical about the Jay Rich injury situation, where I think it's like he had that shoulder surgery, and if he comes in and he's not ready to play right away, and I could easily see Burks just taking that spot, just being the vet that he is, somebody who, was not a vet that was just sitting on the end of a bench for the past 3 years or something. He got traded to the Knicks mid-season and sat for them until the playoffs when everybody was hurt, but he was playing for Detroit, and he was playing for other teams the past few years, being a high volume shooter. And I think because of that kind of just like reliability, you can just go out there and show him off as a volume shooter off the bench and whatever, 15 minutes, whatever it ends up being, 18 minutes. I think that's a good way. It's good for Pelle Larsson to learn from, because they're going to be wanting him to be a little bit more of a willing shooter. And I think Richardson, if he was healthy, I would probably pick him too. And I think you're right in like they probably want to lean on the guy who has a little bit more defense after losing a couple of defenders and DeLon and Caleb. And like you said, Brady, he's that he's more familiar with Jay Rich. I think it makes sense. But yeah, I'm wondering how that's going to play out. It's going to be interesting to hear from Josh on media day to see how he's ready. I know he's positive. He's optimistic. I'm a little bit just like concerned about him being ready for the top. But I do think Burks, if Jay Rich is not ready, I think he gets it. I think if Jay Rich is ready, he gets it. Larsson won't get it, but I think he's one who, just gets inserted into the rotation later on at points throughout the season. And honestly, like, I hope he plays more than that, but I'm a little bit skeptical just because of the these vets in front of him at the same position.
All right, what's yours now?
Well, the other one now that I was thinking about is kind of a more minor one, right? And I think it's a little bit more relevant with the huge news that we got the other day that the Heat signed Nasir Little. I think the battleground here is kind of just like back end guys trying to make it, right? I think the two that come to mind are him and Josh Christopher. And of course, they're in very different positions contractually. Like Josh Christopher probably isn't going to lose that two-way, if I'm being real. I don't. It's not them versus each other for that two-way spot, because Nasir Little also is not eligible for a two-way, and he's on this unguaranteed standard deal. So they're not fighting each other for a contract, but they're fighting each other for the possibility to get minutes at some point, essentially, right? Because I think both guys are trying to, make it. And I feel like both guys felt like the Heat are a good place, with their reputation for developing guys. And even though they have very different skill sets, are not necessarily the same position. I think just either one of them trying to stand out at what they're good at, right? I think is going to be kind of the battleground here, because I do think Josh Christopher kind of has a leg up because he can do a little bit more offensively with the ball in his hands, and also showed a defensive tenacity in Summer League that I think they're kind of going to be looking for. I think whoever really defends at a higher level is probably going to win that. And like, I think people would probably be upset to see like, I don't know, like a day in January and they have like 4 or 5 injuries and Christopher playing over Nasir Little. Like, I think that would be cool. I think people would be upset if it was the other way around, Little over Christopher, because I feel like people got excited about him this summer since he was this kind of highly touted guy. And so was Little, except Christopher, he has like this offensive juice that I think kind of makes him a little bit more interesting as a prospect. You can make the case, though, that Little is a cleaner fit just because he's been playing a role for years now in the league, as far as like being a spot-up guy mostly who just tries to play some defense. But I think Christopher, made a case for himself in the summer. We're like, no, he can play defense too, and he can shoot, and he can create, and he can get to the rim. Now, you got to see if he can put it all together while coming in a very small and consistent role. But I think that's kind of like an interesting one that I'll be monitoring.
Well, I don't know that fans will necessarily be unhappy about that, just because Little is a former first-round pick also, even though he's further into the league at this point. But that always gets fans' attention. I'm going to piggyback off of that one a little bit. This was going to be one of those I was thinking about for the next, but we'll do that one after the break. To me, the other back end of the roster thing is the 3-point guards. Where is Drew Smith right now? We know Spo likes him. but where is he from a health perspective? Zion Pullen, they kept around. I didn't see a lot during summer league that led me to believe they had to keep him around. Isaiah Stevens, I saw a lot that led me to believe they needed to keep him around. And these three guys, provided that Drew is healthy, are going to get a chance to compete because this team needs a backup point guard. I mean, however they end up shuffling the two ways, with Rozier's situation, even though he is cleared for 5-on-5 at this point, you mentioned it. Josh and Burks are not really backup point guards, although they've been thrust into those kind of roles before. And I do think most fans would like to see Stevens win this particular position for the same reason you talked about Christopher. They liked what they saw in summer league. So we'll see how that one plays out. But that is going to be one of those competitions I think we're under the radar that people are going to be talking about a little bit. That maybe is a little more intense than some of what we've seen on the back end of the roster in recent years. All right, we're going to get to three others here on the other side. Before we do, want to mention this, and this is particularly relevant with the storms that are coming in here to South Florida, because one of the things that could happen is your wheels could get damaged. And if your wheels are damaged, you got to reach out to our guy, Mark Dela Cruz at You Break Wheel Fix. You Break Wheel Fix is Miami's premier wheel repair and restoration company. Over 20 years of experience, located in North Miami. You Break Wheel Fix offers quick repairs for damaged wheels, and in most cases can offer the free loaner wheels to keep you on the road while repairing your damaged wheels. If your wheels are looking weathered, it's time to freshen them up. Don't replace them, refinish them. They've got wheel refinishing solutions such as powder coating, machining, and polishing so they can give your car the new look it deserves. So they're at 1848 Northeast 143rd Street in North Miami. Again, that's 1848 Northeast 143rd Street in North Miami. You can give them a call at 305 748 0112. Make sure when you reach out, I'm going to say you at the start, when you reach out to You Break Wheel Fix, mention 5 reasons, because right now he's giving a 5.5% discount on anything that they do for you there. So 5.5% made it really easy to remember. Mention 5 reasons at You Break Wheel Fix. I'm going to go a little off the board here because these are two guys who are clearly going to play big roles for the Heat this season. And they're not often pitted against each other in quite this way. But I am curious with Jovic and Jaquez, whose pop in training camp sticks out more? Because we have a situation now where it seems like Jovic is it seems to me like he's a favorite to be a starter. Although I know Haywood Highsmith is someone we may talk about here too. He's a favorite to be a starter, and it feels to me like Jaquez is a favorite to be a closer, the way that this is headed. And we know that closing means more to the Heat than starting does. And my feeling is Jaquez will get more overall minutes than Jovic this season. But they have very different play styles. And I think which way they lean this year will tell you a little bit about the direction they're trying to take the offense in the future. So I'm just curious who we're going to be talking about more coming out of training camp. Jovic in his 3rd season, which, he kind of had a red shirt year, so it's kind of his 2nd season, or Jaquez in his 2nd season. Brady, I'm wondering who's going to get the attention, because one of them has to, or else this is going to be a very boring camp.
I'll say this. It is funny, though, when you think about it, because both players did pop last year. Like Jovic did later in the season and Jaime did earlier in the season. But neither was, like, popping in camp, if we remember. Like, it wasn't, like, when we were at camp, it was never a conversation of either one was looking. Like, Jaime was, like, the one that was working on his jumper. Like, he wasn't even hitting that next level yet. And Jovic was looked at as a non-rotation guy. And it worked into the rotation later in the season, obviously into the starting lineup. So, this is a much different scenario than we've had with these two guys. I do believe that just because there's more of an opportunity for Jaime to pop, just because he's going to have the ball in his hands more, he's going to run more lineups. And Jovic, I feel like, is trying to play. His kind of idea of this offseason is working into the starting lineup and playing into the role and working on the jumper and playing, off guys like Bam and Jimmy and some of these others. So it probably is setting up for Jaime to be the pop guy specifically, but I think it would be big if Jovic was the guy that we're talking about. If like that would, I mean, he is the younger guy, even though he's the one more year in the NBA. But I'll say this because I'll let me just kick this into the battle I was going to mention, because this kind of plays off this a little bit. Because you mentioned earlier, you said something about the closing lineup, and you said earlier about the kind of battling it out for that. Haywood and Jaime almost feel like the battle for the closing lineup for me. Like, as much as we talk about Terry and Tyler of how they're going to work together, they're closing games. Like they're going to close most games. As much as you talk about defensively, I think when it comes down to it, I don't see one of those guys sitting most nights. So I think it really is an open slot for that closing lineup, and it really comes down to, do we want the pop from Jaime offensively, and it comes down to what we're seeing from him defensively. I mentioned that earlier, but I do think him mentioning that he wants to be better defensively, and I don't want to keep acting like he wasn't. Like, I actually thought he had a pretty good rookie season defensively for his standards. Like, there was not a lot of expectation there, and we knew about the off-ball stuff, but I thought he had to guard like a lot of teams' best players, the best wings, for a good portion, at least for the first half of last season. So if he did improve and he's playing at that level, he could 100% be in the running for closing most nights. Now, this could change depending on certain things, but Haywood's also a guy that I think Spo's going to close a lot of games with. Like, he just trusts him. They need his skill set probably more than anybody on this team. Like, I really do think they need his defensive ability. Guarding guards, guarding wings, switchability, letting Bam kind of play. They want to lean into more drop, and you can't do that if you're playing a lot of these lineups. You can if you're closing with Haywood. So I'm just interested to see that specifically. I don't know if the camp is going to be the tell. That's the only issue. Like, I don't think they're going to walk out of camp and say, okay, Jaime's the closer for this season or Haywood's the closer for this season. I think it still would be on a depending basis. But I think Jaime's level of defense and Haywood's level of offensive improvement, like both of those, will kind of give you the edge of like which way they're going to lean most nights. So I'm kind of interested in that.
All right, Brady, what do you have next?
Well, that was kind of it. I mean, the Haywood Jaime one was kind of it, but
no, we'll take it. I mean, let me get into that a little bit more here too. I do think that what you've been saying consistently, which is that if Hawkins can handle sort of 75% of what Haywood does defensively, it feels like that's the way that Spoelstra would lean. But he's got to prove that he can handle that consistently, because he gives you both elements. He gives you the offense and the defense. Whereas I don't know that there's any way that Haywood can improve enough offensively to do the things that come naturally to Hawkins. So I feel like there's a bar where it's like, okay, if Jaime can handle this assignment where I can put him out here on an island with this guy, it doesn't, again, necessarily mean he's going to be a lockdown guy, but just that he can do enough. I do feel that Spoelstra will kind of lean his way, and that Haywood in a way is kind of the fallback option there. Alex, is that fair?
I think it's pretty fair. I think we saw that Spo definitely likes Jaime a lot. And if he just has another, he has another year where he's looking good to start the season, and it's like he's looking like Jaime. He doesn't have any, like any sort of concerns about the groin from last season, where he doesn't look exactly the same. Like, if he's just right back to looking like Jaime, the way he was, the way he finished off the season, I can 100% see it. And I think, honestly, this is the toughest one of them all to kind of figure out, is the closing lineup. And this could honestly be like its own pod topic. I think the starting lineup, we all feel like we kind of all have the same starting lineup that we're expecting, but the closers, it's really hard. Now, of course, it's going to change, right? It's not going to be set in stone the entire season. Outside of injuries, I think the matchup and who is playing better, right, that specific night is gonna weigh a lot in those decisions. But when you just look at guys who are capable, right, like guys who are capable enough to be closers for this team in different roles, I think they have a lot of players in that conversation. Like Brady was talking about, Jaime and Haywood being one of the bigger battlegrounds there, because we kind of expect Tyler and Terry to close. I think also Duncan and Jovic probably factor into this conversation somewhere, as far as like, Jovic with Jaime and Haywood as like the, who fills up those wing spots, and then Duncan with Terry and Tyler as far as who fills out the backcourt. Like, all those guys are capable and of course do different things, and I feel like they're all good enough. So it's going to be really interesting, because that's a lot of guys. And even though I agree, it'll probably, like, if I had to put money on like who or what combinations are we going to see the most, I'm probably with you, Brady, that it's Terry, Tyler, and one of Jaime or Haywood. But I could see this going a lot of different ways.
I think it could be both a lot of nights, because I mean, as much as we talk about them being healthier, all four
you go two wings and one guard.
They could do that, or even if one of the guys is out, Haywood and Jaime is 100% two closers. So I think both of them probably going to close most games.
One guy we haven't mentioned, is Tyler Herro. Do we need to close with that one, Alex? Would you go with this? Are Tyler and Duncan in competition with each other? Because I think that's where most people would go right away.
That's what we were just kind of talking about, really, with the closing stuff. Because I mean, of course, there is a competition for starting as well, because that's not set in stone yet, right? You had heard there's only 2 that are set in stone. So, like, that's, to me, they're in competition with each other for starting and closing right now, because we don't really know how it's going to play out. And Duncan obviously had a leap last season skill-wise. So I think, whether it's him starting or him closing, you have to consider him just because of the way that he gets your offense to move. And, of course, this is assuming that he is back to where he was before. And that's not quite as clear, right? Like, that's going to be another guy I'm definitely going to be interested to hear from, along with Terry, as far as, like, how ready are you, right? How good do you feel, all that. But, yeah, like, Duncan is 100% in these conversations with Tyler. Who's going to start? Who's going to close? And I think it kind of goes with Terry as well, too, because I just think they're all kind of filling out the backcourt.
How do you think it plays out? How do you think these play out, Brady? Let's go through the list real quick. Love versus Ware.
Over the course of the season, I think it's Ware.
Burks versus Jay Rich. Alex, you change your view on that?
No, I think if Jay Rich is healthy, he gets it. If not, it'll be Burks. And I agree with Brady on Love and Ware that, like, whenever Love doesn't play, Ware is going to play. And there's going to be some nights where maybe they roll double bigs together in certain matchups, but I'm not expecting it to be an every night thing.
Little versus Christopher. I think they're going to lean into Christopher a little bit here because of what they saw this offseason. Again, this year's on a deal that it's not guaranteed. They have until January 7th to get themselves out of it. I kind of feel like having seen less of Christopher in the NBA is an advantage for him, whereas we've had 5 years of tape on Little, and he hasn't popped in any significant way. It feels like Christopher's a little closer to the starting blocks here, so maybe a little better chance there. Jovic, Jaquez, who pops more in camp, Brady?
I'm going to stick with Jaquez. I just think he's going to have the ball in his hands more. And they're going to put a little bit more on his plate than they will with Jovic, because I think they're going to try to somewhat put him off ball, like just try to drill down his spot up shooting. Even though I think we all want Jovic to have the ball in his hands, it's like we're talking about these lineups, like even the closing lineup conversation we just had. It's like, okay, can Jaime fit in this lineup? But it's like Haywood probably fits the lineup more because they have 4 guys that are going to need the ball in their hands to like operate at the end of the game. So it gets to a certain point where it's like, there is one ball with a lot of guys we want to see have the ball in their hands here. So I just think the opportunity is going to be there for Jaquez because he's going to be running these second units.
We talked about Haywood and Jaquez a lot. Tyler and Duncan, put you guys both in the spot. Who's the starter at the 2 coming out of camp?
Tyler.
It's Tyler.
Yeah, I think so too. I think
they weren't good enough. They weren't dominant enough with Duncan starting for it to go back to him, even though it's not his fault because he was doing his job. But like, I think because of that, since it wasn't like so amazing and like, just undeniable, I think that'll be an excuse for them to just kind of be like, we're going to put our best players in the starting lineup and see how they play together.
And even if Duncan's healthy, I don't think that type of injury, this is the time to like throw him in the starting lineup and like push it. Like, I don't know. It just feels a little like it would be rushed. Like if there was a time to do it, I think working him in off the bench would probably be best for that type of injury, and like working him throughout a regular season. You don't want to push it. But either way, I do think it's Tyler.
Well, the biggest thing about all these training camp battles, and I hate to jinx anything one way or the other, but probably we're going to have a lot of rest days and lack of availability for certain guys. It's just been the norm here in recent years, and these things probably take care of themselves in that way. All right, we'll have the coverage from Media Day from the Bahamas. Thanks to Alex. Thanks to Brady. More episodes coming up over the weekend. Again, check out You Break, We'll Fix. We also mentioned, again, water cleanup, WCUFL.com. With all that rain outside here, you may need them very, very soon. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.